Hi guys, king's activities are very important in pawn endgames, and sometimes the routes that your king takes can make a difference between winning and drawing, or drawing and losing. Let's look at the first example here. White is to move. This position is a draw if both pieces play the best moves. For black, her move is very easy here. Move the pawn forward. The king is already quite advanced and control the promotion path of the pawn, so just move the pawn forward. Unfortunately for white, you can move the pawn or you can move the king. Maybe try to stop the promotion of the pawn. Which one is the best move, do you think? Is it the same? Feel free to pause the video if you would like to analyze this position further first. Okay, it's not the same unfortunately. Here if you move the pawn first, white will lose. We can just play it and see how it plays out. So a4, and then f4, a5, and now here f3, which comes with a check. So white has to waste a tempo trying to move away from the check. Let's say g3, and now black goes f2, a6, and now black promotes. And white is one tempo short of promoting. Black can take the pawn and then checkmate white next. So if we move the pawn, white will lose. Here instead, white needs to move the king. So first white needs to go king g3. And here black needs to follow. The best move here for black is king e3. But let me show you what happens if black doesn't. Let's say it's trying to chase the pawn, right? So king d3 instead, then this pawn will fall. And yeah, this pawn will also fall. The pawn on the a file, but then it's a draw, which is fine because the best white can hope for is a draw. So going back to the original position with king g3, the best move for black here is king e3. But then now white goes back to king g2. And here the thing is, black again has to follow. If black doesn't follow, let's say black move the pawn instead, then we go king f1. And now black has no way to dislodge this white king from f1. White can just push the pawn forward. And now black has to chase the pawn. So black will manage to capture this pawn, but then white will be able to capture the pawn at f3 as well. And then again, it's back to a draw. So again, black's best move in this position is to follow, which is king e2. And again, white's move is to go king g3. And black move is again, the best move is king e3. So that's why it's called the pendulum. Basically, we go back and forth, and the black king has to follow. The threat is, if we're at king g3, the threat is to go to king f4. If we're at king g2, then the threat is to go to king f1. And with this, white will be able to manage a draw instead of losing if he just pushes the pawn. Okay, so that was the concept of pendulum. Now let's look at another concept about king's root called zigzag. Looking at this position, it looks very similar with the previous position, but here white is to play, and white can actually win here. There are two differences with the previous position. First, the black pawn, if you notice, is further back, and secondly, this pawn here, when it queens, it might be able to give a check to the king when the king, if the king stays at a2. So with those two differences, with best moves, white can win. But again, it's not easy to find the best move. You have to find the right technique. What is the right technique? Here, the most straightforward move, which is again just moving the pawn, that will draw. Let's play it out. So let's say white just moved g4. You can see the evaluation gauge turned to a draw already, because what black will do is just moving the pawn forward as well. So b5, g5, b4, g6. Now b3 comes with a check, so the king moves. Let's say king c3, and now b2, g7, black promotes. White promotes as well and give a check actually, but then black goes king a1. And here there's nothing much white can do really. Can give another check, a8, then the queen deflect. Check again, the queen deflect again. So it would just be a perpetual check. This is a draw. So moving pawn doesn't work. Here the right move is actually king c3. Use your king, which is, I guess, is the theme of the whole video, right? King's root. Black has to follow. If black doesn't follow, we go king b4 and gobble up the pawn. So king a3 is the right move. And now again, we do king c4, still moving the king. Black has to follow again, king a4. And only then that we go g4. Now black's best moves, b5 check. And here it's important to go to d3 and not c3. If we go c3, then it's a draw because black goes king a3. And then we have another check. And we have to waste another tempo moving the king away from the check. So the right move is king d3. And this is also why it's called a zigzag. Basically, instead of going down to c3 and c2, and each time white king, that is, will be in the way of the pawn, so it will get checked every time. White should just go to king d3 and then back to king c2 later. So let's see this played out. So b4, keep going with the pawn. G5. Now b3 is best move for black. We go g6. And here black's already lost, right? Let's say b2. Then we go back. King c2. Do you see the pattern? That's the zigzag pattern. We move away from this square so that we don't get checked. And here black cannot promote because the king is there in c2. So black has to move the king back. And then we go g7. And black has to yet waste another tempo. And now we go g8 finally. And queen, which comes with a check. And here white wins easily, right? No matter what black's move is, check is coming, this pawn is falling. And black is getting checkmated after. Okay, so now we have seen the sequences to win. But let's understand really the logic of why it works, right? Because when I first look at this puzzle and someone showed me the answer, I still got really confused for a few hours. I don't understand why it works. What is the difference between just moving the pawn and the sequences of things that we saw, which is moving the king first and then go back and then move the pawns upward? It looks the same to me. But basically the logic is that by moving the king first, we gain a lot of tempo. And the gain of tempo comes from three things. First, when we move the kings upward, black has to follow us. So black gain no tempo because the king has to follow us. But then now when black trying to promote the pawn, black has to move the king back down, right? So black wastes the tempo there. Secondly, when white goes back down, it does so in a zigzag way, thus avoiding a check. It might look deceiving, but going back zigzag and going back straight down actually consumes the same tempo, right? It's 2 tempo. But with going back zigzag, white saves a tempo from getting checked. And then lastly, here's the thing that I was talking about earlier as well, which is when we go king c2, then black's king needs to go back, and then needs to go back again to cover b1 so that the pawn can promote. Waste a lot of tempo there. And now finally, we're lucky enough in this position that when we promote, we get a check, which means that black has to waste another tempo moving the king. So those are the differences between just moving the pawn forward and the zigzag maneuver that we did. We saved a lot of tempo by doing the zigzag maneuver. And it is, in this case, a difference between drawing and winning. Okay guys, that's all from me in this video. I hope you guys find it useful and interesting. If you like this kind of content and would like to support the channel, please don't forget to subscribe and like the video, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Thank you very much.